have 6:30.
I think you should go ahead and start the meeting.
Okay. Um, Chelsea, I forwarded
Recording in
you.
progress.
Chelsea, I forwarded you a script for the meeting. Um, Speaking of, um, good evening. Now is the time and place for a meeting of the Beaverton Planning Commission. For the record, I will do a roll call to verify which commission members are participating this evening. We have everyone is present outside of Commissioner Ellis, who we anticipate to be joining shortly. Are there any commission communications? Oh, Commissioner Ellis is joining now. And seeing no commission communications, how about staff communication?
Thank you. My name is Anna Slatinsky. I'm the Planning Division Manager in the Community Development Department in Beaverton. I just have two brief items. Commissioners will have received an invitation to a boards and commissions workshop, kind of boards and commissions and council goals workshop for next Thursday evening. I just wanted to fill you in a little bit on what the purpose is of that meeting. It's a gathering where the volunteers from all the different boards and commissions have an opportunity to meet each other, hear from the mayor and the city manager about council goals and city work programs, and then talk about their experience as volunteers and kind of what can make the experience positive for them. Some of the boards and commissions are able to also make their own work plans, so that's going to occupy a part of the evening. But I just wanted to fill you in a little bit. I know some of you have been interested in having some more in-person interaction, and this might be an opportunity for that. And so I just wanted to kind of make that note. Your attendance is not required, and there will not be any planning commission specific training at that workshop next week. So want to make sure that you're fully informed. The other thing that I want to do is introduce you all to our acting current planning manager. Jana Fox is on parental leave, and senior planner Steve Regner is filling her role. And I wanted to give him a chance to say hello and introduce himself. You'll be hearing from him rather than Jana for a little while. So, Steve, do you want to go ahead and turn your camera on and say hello?
Thanks, Anna. Good evening, commissioners. Steve Regner, um, interim current planning manager. It's a title I'm still getting used to. As Anna said, current planning manager Jenna Fox is on parental leave through Memorial Day, so I will be operating in that position in her stead. So you'll be seeing a lot more of me at planning commission meetings, but in a different capacity than most of you are used to. So it is always a pleasure working with the commission and looking forward to doing it in this new way. So thank you, and we'll see you soon.
And that's it for staff comments.
Great, thanks. Congratulations, Steve, on the temporary promotion.
Thank you very much.
Um, let's see, we have some miscellaneous business tonight. Before we begin the first agenda item, we will be holding elections of officers. Do I have a nomination for position of chair? Mr. Winter, do you want to make a nomination?
Yeah, I was just making sure that everything was on. I have a tendency to start talking without the mic being on. I would like to nominate Commissioner McCanns for the chair for the next 2 years. I think her strengths are well known to all of us.
Great. Do you accept the nomination, Commissioner McCann?
I do accept.
Great. Are there any further nominations?
Actually, Chair, and I just wanted to note that the Planning Commission bylaws actually specify electing officers annually. So while I appreciate the nomination for 2 years, we're just going to have to do it all over again in 12 months. So I just wanted to note that for everyone's information.
Commissioner Winter was trying to sign me up for an extra long term.
I actually was under the impression it was a 2-year term. So it's kind of surprising that at 2 years, 2 years. But that's fine.
Commissioner Winter was trying to sign me up for an extra long term.
I actually was under the impression it was a 2-year term. So it's kind of surprising that at 2 years, 2 years. this long in my, or at this date in my membership of the commission, I didn't know that.
Okay. So Commissioner McCann has been nominated for a 1-year term. Do we have any other nominations? Okay. Seeing no further nominations, sorry, I'm reading the notes from my staff about this. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, we have it unanimous. Thank you. So with that, Commissioner McCann has been elected chair. Do we have a nomination for vice chair? Can I make a nomination?
Sure.
Okay, I
Somebody
nominate.
better.
I nominate Commissioner Winter for vice chair. He's kindly filled in the past. Do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further nominations? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, I think that was unanimous. So the both motions have passed unanimously. If Commissioner McCann would like to take over, she can continue the hearing this evening.
Sure. Since you so kindly sent me the information,
Yeah.
I would love to. All right, so let's move on to new business. The first item on the agenda is the application for LU 3-2023-00762, the Emler Swim School Tannisbourne, case file number CUN 3-2023-00761. The applicant has the burden of proving that the applications are consistent with the Beaverton Development Code, Comprehensive Plan, and any applicable Beaverton Code provision. The criteria that must be addressed in the hearing are Development Code sections 40.03.1, the Facilities Review Committee, and 40.15.15.5, C, the new conditional use. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward these approval criteria or other criteria in the Comprehensive Plan or Development Code that the speaker believes to apply to the application. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to allow the Planning Commission and other interested parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude an appeal to Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Anyone who submits written comments or gives oral testimony has standing to appeal this decision. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. State and local law require commissioners to make certain disclosures. To these ends, the following questions will be asked. Does any commissioner have a potential or actual conflict of interest, ex parte contacts, or site visits to declare? Commissioner Akal.
None to alter.
Commissioner Ellis.
I don't believe so. Just for pure clarity, we have visited the Washington Square location, looking for lessons for my children in the past. We've never done business though with Emler, and this was a while ago. So I don't believe I have any conflicts.
Commissioner Glenwinkle.
No to all three.
Commissioner Lawler.
No to all three.
Commissioner Winter.
No, although I am familiar with the site as it used to be a restaurant that I went to quite frequently.
Commissioner Nye.
No to all three for me.
Right. Does any member of the audience wish to question a commissioner about ex parte contacts or site visits or challenge the right of any commissioner to participate in this hearing? Seeing none. Let the record show no response. The order of the public hearing tonight will be as follows. City staff will give a presentation followed by commissioners' questions of staff. The applicant will be given 20 minutes for its presentation, followed by the commission's questions of the applicant. Then members of the public in support of the application can speak for up to 5 minutes each. Then members of the public opposed to the application can speak for up to 5 minutes each. And members of the public who are neither in support nor opposed will then have 5 minutes to speak. After public testimony, the applicant will have 5 minutes for rebuttal. The Planning Commission will then hear any final comments from staff. We will now begin with the staff presentation.
Right. All right, everybody see the presentation? Fantastic. Okay. Well, greetings, Chair and Commissioners. I'm Aaron Harris, Senior Planner, City of Beaverton Community Development Department. My presentation this evening is for LU3 2023-00762, Elmore Swim School, Tanasbourne, Land Use Application CUN3 2023-00761. This slide outlines the land use application associated with the project. The proposal only includes a new conditional use application to operate a commercial school on the subject site. The applicant proposes to convert an existing approximately 7,609 square foot restaurant building for use as an indoor swimming lesson facility for children. All proposed work is located inside the building. No changes to the site are proposed. And as illustrated on this map, the general location of the subject site is southeast of the Northwest Cornell Road and Northwest 158th Avenue intersection. Here's the vicinity map zooming in on the site. The subject site is located at the northeast corner of the Northwest Waterhouse Avenue and Northwest Gateway Court intersection on the east side of Waterhouse Avenue, and the site is 1.34 acres. This slide identifies the existing on-site use and the uses in the surrounding area. The subject site is currently a restaurant building. The property to the north is undeveloped. The property to the east is a hotel. To the south is a fitness club, and the property to the west is a gas station. This slide provides a zoning map of the site and surrounding area. The subject site is zoned office industrial, as are the properties to the north, south, east, and west. Here's a site plan illustrating the existing site design. And as previously noted, there are no changes to the site proposed with the application. This slide provides a street view of the existing elevations as seen from Northwest Gateway Court, looking north towards the building's southern facade. And this slide provides a street view of the existing elevations as seen from Northwest Waterhouse Avenue, looking east towards the building's western facade. This slide addresses the conditional use request for the commercial school. The proposal requires the new conditional use proposal for the use because commercial schools are a conditional use in the office industrial zoning district. Staff recommends that Planning Commission approves Elmore Swim School, Tanasbourne, subject to the conditions identified in the staff report. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Are there any questions of staff with regard to the proposed application? I don't see any. So the applicant will now have 20 minutes to present if the applicant is here. Please begin by introducing yourselves and stating your names and addresses for the record.
Hello, my name is Kendra Walker, 5910. I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous. I have not presented it, and I wasn't sure if my video was going to come on or not. So anyway, 5910 75 Central, Dallas, Texas. I'll start my video. Two other team members are joining me tonight. Craig Kinney, who's the Vice President of Real Estate and Strategy for Imler Swim School, and Eric Aarson, who is our chosen architect. I don't know if I said, my name is Kendra Walker. I am Vice President of Operations for Imler Swim School, and I've been with the company 30 years, starting from way back when Jan, well, right after Jan Imler started in 75. I didn't join her to the early 90s. So if you're calculating my age, I'm not quite as old as Jan. She did start teaching in backyard pools in Texas, and today we have 51 swim schools in 11 states across the country. A fun and exciting calculation we did recently is that we have just recently taught over 1 million children to swim. And that has been over the last almost 50 years. We do have an award-winning curriculum, and Imler's purpose-built facilities make us unique. And also, we are corporately owned. We are not a franchise. And again, I'm glad that you guys have seen that we do have visibility there in Portland. We have the Martinazzi location and also the Beaverton location in Washington Square. And we were also voted best places to work in Portland last year. So we are very excited as a newcomer to the Portland community to have achieved that recognition. And that, if you are not familiar with that, that is voted on by the team, our team. It's not something that we promote in-house. The team votes, and it is all done externally. It is always our goal to be a good community partner, and we have started an Imler Cares program where we, our team members and families of our swimmers participate in local fundraising and charity events. Choosing Portland as a location aligns with our mission to eradicate childhood drowning. We prioritize geographic locations that are underserved by private swim schools so that we can teach the most non-swimming kids as possible. I noticed recently in some of the articles I read from your area that the Portland community is now going to be sponsoring, or the city is going to be serving second graders in Portland with swim lessons. So that's not with us, but that is part of what the city of Portland is doing to help eradicate childhood drowning. So we have a good partnership and working toward achieving the goal of eradicating childhood drowning. Interesting fact too is, if you've am I not showing my screen? You guys are not seeing anything that I'm talking about, are you?
No, not yet.
Somebody should have said something to me. I'm sorry. Okay, can you see my screen now? Is it
Yes,
big enough?
yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit, and I will. These are our purpose-built facilities, similar to what you would see. If you, Commissioner Ellis, I think you said you had been to a location. This is similar of all our locations. We have a reception area and observation areas. The majority of the facility is a swimming pool, in fact. And we have private changing rooms and restrooms to serve our customers and changing tables. The majority of our swimmers happen to be preschoolers. So that's the majority of the community that we serve. Does anybody have any? I guess I'll get questions after this. So these were the drowning statistics that I found recently. The source is a letter to Republican Jason Korf from the Oregon House of Representatives, just showing that the drowning rates in Oregon are higher than other West Coast states, and in fact, in the United States, drowning is the #1 reason for a child under the age of 5 to die an accidental death. So Eric, I will turn it over to you with this next slide.
Thanks, Kendra. I don't know. So I'm the architect of record on the project, and we've been working with Kendra and Craig for a long time now. And like she mentioned, we have the 2 other projects, one in Beaverton and one in Tennisbourne. I don't know if I'm going to be able to mention much more than Aaron kind of already mentioned, but this slide basically just outlines, why we're here, why we needed the conditional use, the zoning for the area where our location is hoped to be developed. So if you want to go ahead to the next one, because I think we kind of covered that through Aaron's presentation. Again, this is the site. This is the building. It's existing, and all we're doing to it is renovating the interior. So there's no site work to be done, no modifications to parking. All we're doing is really just upgrading and adding 2 bike stalls per the development code. So this slide kind of just outlines that, gives you an idea of what the building looks like on the site and what space we're taking. You can see it's the only building on the site, so we don't have any close adjacent neighbors on the site, no tenants next door. If you want to go ahead to the next slide. Let's see. This was a part of our conditional use application, but I thought it was sort of relevant to this. Basically, it is just a trip generation report or impact study that showcases that by changing the use or by adding our commercial school to the property, we're actually decreasing the amount of trips on the adjacent streets. So it'll be a net decrease of trip generation. It's not going to add to the traffic of the area. And this slide just sort of outlines that data. So we added it as it's relevant. If you want to go to the next one. And then just to give you a little brief understanding of what it's going to look like on the inside. And I know this obviously doesn't tell you everything, but it gives you kind of a sense. There's the pool over there to the right. You can see the swim lanes and the buoys. And it's really, everything is sort of focused around the pool. There's not a lot of other stuff going on to it other than a couple of offices, storage area, pool equipment room, and some restrooms. And then, of course, viewing areas for the parents. So we're just trying to provide as big as a pool we can inside of a building and kind of working around the existing structure. And that's kind of the gist of what's going on architecturally. Is there one more, or is that it? Okay.
That was it. So now I can ask, does anyone have any questions?
Yes, so Commissioner Ellis?
Yeah, sorry, maybe an easy or a dumb one, but you mentioned no modifications to the exterior of the building. I am assuming fresh coat of paint, branding, and signage at least, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Branding and signage, definitely. And any lighting repair, any lighting. I know that building's been vacant for a while, so everything will be brought up to, a safe and beautiful appearance from the street.
Gotcha.
A lot of little ones coming and going in and out of our space, so a lot of attention is given to safety. Anybody else?
Do any other commissioners have questions? Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much.
Can I just say thank you for allowing us to be here? It was an honor and nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
All right, we are now at the public testimony portion for this agenda item. We will call testimony in groups, starting with those in favor of the application, then those in opposition to the application, and then those that are neither in favor nor in opposition. As a reminder, testimony is limited to the criteria that apply to the application. So now is the time for testimony in favor. For those viewing via Zoom webinar, please communicate by using the raise hand feature in your Zoom menu bar. If calling in, press 9 to alert the chair that you would like to speak. Do we have anyone in favor? It appears that we do not have anyone, so we will move on to those who public testimony.
Hey, sorry, Commissioner McCann. Somebody popped up with a hand raise, like right before you. I think it was that John Fifield. I think put his hand up for in favor. Oh, down now. Never mind.
It may have been an accidental hand. We will move on to public testimony in opposition of the application. Do we have anyone who would like to speak in opposition? Staff says we have none. So we will move on to those who are neither in favor nor in opposition. Does anyone wish to speak? Looks like still no. So given that we don't have any public testimony, I don't think a rebuttal is required. So we will move on to any final staff comments. Does staff have any final comments?
No final staff comments. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. With that completed, I will close the public hearing and, as is standard procedure, randomly poll commissioners to state their conclusions on the application. Commissioner Akal.
It's pretty straightforward. It's all good.
Commissioner Ellis.
Yeah, similar. Seems pretty straightforward. Good service for the community. I believe I'm in support.
Great. Commissioner Winter.
I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think this is a great use of an abandoned building. All the luck.
Commissioner Glenwinkle.
I think it's pretty straightforward. I think the location is perfect. Lots of complementary uses nearby. So I'm happy to see the building get put to use and recommend approval.
Commissioner Lawler.
Yes, for all the reasons mentioned heretofore, I concur that it meets the criteria for approval.
Right. And Commissioner Nye.
I concur with my fellow commissioners.
Okay. And I am also in support. So is there a motion?
Oh yeah, this is where I jump in.
Yeah.
I move to approve LU 32023-00762 Emler Swim School, Annisbourne, based on the facts and figures of the staff report dated January 31st, 2024.
I can second that.
Great. Seconded by Commissioner Akal. A vote will be taken by roll call. When your name is called, please say yay or nay. Commissioner Ellis.
Yay.
Commissioner Nye.
Yay.
Commissioner Glenwinkle.
Aye.
Commissioner Lawler.
Aye.
Commissioner Winter.
Aye.
Commissioner Akal.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Motion passes unanimously. The Planning Commission's decision will be memorialized in land use orders that will be provided to all parties that provided oral and written testimony. If you would like to appeal this decision, you must appeal in accordance with the applicable provisions in the Beaverton Development Code and the rules of the Land Use Board of Appeals. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Winter, you were.
Yeah, that was only one application. There's another one.
Oh. I apologize. I thought it was just the one.
Have land use and PUN, whatever that is.
Robin,
So-
wanted to speak.
Commissioners, Robin McIntyre, Assistant City Attorney. There's really just one application. It has two numbers. One is like it's kind of like a file number, and the other one is an application number, but it's really just one application.
That's why I didn't understand what a CUN was. I was like, all right, thank you.
Just for commissioners' information, with the institution of the new electronic permitting system in Beaverton that was kicked off in spring of 2023 for land use applications, we had to establish a different numbering system in order to match with the functionality of the system. So commissioners who have been used to the previous system of numbering may be a little bit confused, totally understandably, but just a little bit of background on why the numbers don't look like they used to.
Let me ask a question. When on the staff report it says an application project name and then it says application numbers, in the future, how am I supposed to know that? Am I supposed to just recognize that from previous experience that CUN doesn't mean anything?
You know, I think we better provide a little bit of a decoder for Planning Commission. Thank you for suggesting that. We will prepare a document to help kind of translate and demystify those numbers, so you know what you need to pay attention to.
So 90% of the letters that we used to see in an application number I'm familiar with. Every once in a while, someone pulls one out of the middle of the dark ages that I haven't seen for a long time, and I'm like, oh, I have to look it up. And that's why I was like, the CUN. It's like, oh, okay, I've had one for a while. What's that mean?
Yeah, well, we'll follow up to help it make more sense.
All right, thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
That's great. Those are great questions. So I believe I've said all the right things, so we should be done with that. All right, so we will move on to our last item of the night, which is the work session on the Cooper Mountain Community Plan Draft Development Code. The order of the work session tonight will be as follows. We will begin with the city staff presentation, followed by discussion and questions of staff by the commission. The Planning Commission will then hear public comments regarding the work session item. Individual comments will be limited to 5 minutes. The commission may ask additional questions of individuals providing comments of staff and so we will now begin with the presentation presented by Senior Planner Rob Zoller.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, commissioners. Rob Zeller, Senior Planner with the City's Planning Division and the Project Manager for the Cooper Mountain Community Plan. Tonight, I am joined by Anna Slatinsky, Planning Division Manager, Brian Martin, Long Range Planning Manager, and Alyssa Maxwell, Capital Planning Project Manager, all of whom may participate in the Q&A. We are here tonight to request feedback on the draft development rules for the Cooper Mountain Community Plan area. Before I start with the draft rules, Brian Martin will speak for a couple of minutes on the project history, the path to adoption, and the format of tonight's presentation.
Thank you, Rob. I'm Brian Martin, Long Range Planning Manager. Chair, before we get too far in, because we have a lot of content to cover tonight and then next week on the 14th, I wanted to let you know that staff plans to pause partway through the presentation to allow questions and comments from commissioners. And then once that discussion is complete, staff will resume the presentation and commissioners will have an opportunity for a second round of questions and comments. And then, of course, that would be followed by public comment. Given that we'll be back next week, we'd also recommend the chair determine when to wrap up the conversation to allow for public comments before the hour gets too late. So I just wanted to know, Chair, if you support that format and how we are thinking of doing it.
I think that sounds great. I assume you will lead when you're wanting to pause at that midpoint.
Yeah, Rob's gonna give cues during the presentation about when we're gonna stop. Okay, thank you. So a little bit of intro before the main presentation. I wanted to first thank the Planning Commission and the community members for their participation tonight and throughout the project. Staff has been working for more than 4 years on this project with community members, the Planning Commission, and the City Council to identify a vision for this 1,200-acre urban growth boundary expansion area. This slide shows the basic location in the southwest corner of the city. And we expect this area to eventually have about 5,000 homes. So over that time period, the project has involved research and analysis to better understand Cooper Mountain, looking at different alternative visions for the area's future, and helping the community and city council identify a preferred vision and approach for the area. That was reflected in the draft Cooper Mountain Community Plan that council reviewed last summer. And that document it lays out goals and desired outcomes for Cooper Mountain. Information about that document is in the supplemental memo in your materials, and there's a link to the document as well. Rob, if you can go to the next slide. So these are the goals that have been guiding the project all along. And basically, this cues us into the idea that the city is seeking equitable, inclusive neighborhoods, more housing, natural resources protection and enhancement, foundational things like needed infrastructure and transportation, and commercial opportunities so folks have access to goods and services as well as entrepreneurial opportunities. So given that there are limited city resources and acres in Cooper Mountain, some of those require balancing and prioritizing. So tonight is an important step because implementation measures, including these draft development rules we're talking about, will help achieve the Cooper Mountain Community Plan goals and desired outcomes. We really appreciate community members and commissioners' role in reviewing these draft rules and informing potential refinements as we move toward approval later this year. So again, thank you, and I'll hand it off to Rob for the rest.
Great, thank you. And that brings us to the draft code overview. Before we get into specifics, I'd like to talk about the schedule for a minute. After next week's work session, we'll take a month to consider updates to the code based on feedback. On April 16th, we'll present the draft code updates to City Council. And in May, we'll hold additional work sessions with the Planning Commission to discuss code refinements and comprehensive plan updates. Barring any new developments, the hearings to adopt proposed changes to the development code and comprehensive plan could begin in July. As described in the January 24th memo in your packet, tonight's work session will focus on land use, zoning, housing, commercial uses, natural resources, and trees. Next week, we intend to review rules for design, land unit developments, and the parks overlay. We'll start tonight with the proposed land use map. The comprehensive plan land use map determines what city land use policies apply to different locations in the city and which zoning districts can be applied within those comprehensive plan designations. The basic approach of the land use map is to apply the commercial, sorry about that. Trying to turn my pointer on. To apply the commercial land use designation marked in red, where only the Cooper Mountain Community Service Zone is allowed to emphasize the importance of commercial areas. Apply the mixed use corridor marked in purple to provide flexibility. 3 different zones can be applied in that designation, which I will cover on the next slide. And apply the residential zone marked in yellow to show where detached homes, middle housing, and multi-dwellings with 5 or 6 units are the desired outcome. The table on this slide lists zoning districts that can be used within each comprehensive plan designation. Both Cooper Mountain Commercial and Cooper Mountain Residential have one implementing zoning district. Mixed-use corridors have 3 different zones that can be applied in the designation because the intent for this designation is to provide flexibility. Let's take a closer look at what zones the zones on the next slide. So this is the draft zoning map, which identifies geographic locations where different development rules apply. The proposed zones applied are Cooper Mountain Community Service, or CMCS, marked in red. This is intended to require a minimum amount of commercial building square footage in each development to provide access to goods and services while allowing residential development. Cooper Mountain High Density Residential, marked in purple, is intended primarily to be a residential district with the highest number of units per acre in Cooper Mountain, but it also allows commercial. It does not require a minimum amount of commercial floor area, though. Cooper Mountain Multi-Unit Residential, or CMMR, marked in orange, is intended to result in predominantly attached residential developments with the highest number of units per acre of Cooper Mountain zones that allow residential development. Cooper Mountain Residential Mixed, or CMRM, marked in yellow. This is intended to allow a mix of housing types, including detached and attached housing at the lowest number of units per acre of Cooper Mountain's residential zones, as well as opportunities for small-scale commercial uses. In CMRM, the draft code also requires housing variety and integration for developments 3 acres and larger. I'll talk more about this in a minute. There are 2 overlay zones that indicate where special rules apply. The first is the resource overlay zone. Some development would be allowed in this area that has the green hatch, but it would be limited. We'll talk more about that later in the presentation. The second is the parks overlay, which indicates locations where community parks or neighborhood parks are required. And the parks overlay is slated for discussion at the February 14th work session. If an applicant would like to request comprehensive plan changes and zoning changes, then the proposal would have to be consistent with the Cooper Mountain land use policies, which are described in attachment C in your packet. The intent of the land use policies is to ensure that future comprehensive plan changes and zoning changes are consistent with the vision and desired outcomes described in the community plan. To ensure these outcomes, the land use policies address factors such as locational criteria for commercial, mixed-use corridor, and residential land use designations, as well as additional guidance for future rezoning applications. Regarding zoning, I'd like to focus on draft code that contains notable differences compared to the existing development code. First, the code allows higher height limits, an additional 5 or 10 feet than other similar districts, so that buildings can reach an adequate height on sites with slopes, and so developers have flexibility to preserve natural resources. Second, in CMRM, which is similar to RMB, used throughout the rest of the city, 5-plexes and 6-plexes are allowed in addition to other middle housing types. Third, in CMRM, the draft code requires housing variety and integration for developments 3 acres and larger to provide 30% of housing units and housing types other than single detached homes, and integrate that housing somewhat to help create more inclusive neighborhoods. And fourth, small-scale commercial uses are allowed near the CMMR district, neighborhood routes, and parks. And that brings us to the first part of the discussion. We have 4 questions, 1 on this slide and 3 on the next slide. Question 1 is, do the proposed land use designations and zoning districts and the way they are applied on the land use map and zoning map achieve the community plan goals and city council's desired outcomes? In other words, do you think the land use map and policies provide sufficient flexibility for property owners and developers while ensuring different approaches still meet council's goals and desired outcomes? We can pause for discussion now. If you'd like me to keep the screen up, I can, but I can also stop sharing for a moment if that's preferred.
Commissioners, does anyone have questions or want to respond to this question? I guess that's what I should say.
I'll go first. I maybe I don't know what to ask in this state. Like I have the goals document up, and I remember the conversation, and I'm looking at the map here, and I'm kind of leaning on staff to say, does this mix of use types at a minimum allow for approaching the housing goals laid out in terms of number of units? Pretending that there's a world in which across every one of these zoning districts, do developers make the lowest count possible decisions when creating units? Like does it still all add up to the goal of how many total South Cooper Mountain units that are needed to be added? Maybe that's the first question in my head. So are we confident, or do you have maybe I'm missing a piece of the materials here that says that under worst conditions, these recommended districts here should still produce the goal-wise number of units for South Cooper Mountain?
We are confident on the number that's been analyzed, and so we're comfortable that it could produce that number of units. We interview developers a lot, and what we typically hear is people want more units. They're usually not trying to put less units on the site. They're trying to put more, generally. Did you have a follow-up question, or was it where we
No,
need to target?
No, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah.
I think there's probably like some sub thoughts under there around, there are neighborhoods in Beaverton that get set up and they have certain exclusionary measures such as cost prohibitive HOAs and stuff like that. That's probably outside the scope of this discussion. So just in terms of counts and units, I think that did answer the question.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a follow-up question. Is there a percentage used, like this will be like housing for low income and then single family, townhomes, condominiums? Is there a percentage assigned to that, Matt? Maybe that's not a valid question, but just thought the variety of, construction and housing availability.
We try to provide flexibility for the developers. We don't expect a certain number. One exception would be for regulated affordable. Our goal is 450 units for regulated affordable. I do think, the model, of course, has to have inputs. I haven't looked at the inputs for a while, but we really could see many different scenarios. There are many different ways we can get to 5,000. And so we have the housing variety requirements, which we'll talk about later. So as sites get larger, they will be required to have some variety, but it could really be many different combinations of housing types.
Thank you.
I think I saw a hand up first from Commissioner Nye.
Yes, I was looking at the land use map. And first, the area along Grabhorn, I'm curious how the boundary between the purple and the yellow was determined, because it doesn't seem to align with a parcel line. And like why the whole area within the blue dotted area wouldn't have been purple? Like how are those decisions made, and are they as random as they look?
Yeah, I think, Brian, do you mind taking that one?
Sure. Am I trying to hit my video? There we go. Brian Martin, Long Range Planning Manager. Thanks, Chair Nye. You can see a similar thing happening on the zoning map. There was we imagined that would be a mostly RM area with single detached houses and middle housing, but there was a small area provided for the MR zone and the purple mixed use zone where commercial is not required. That purple land use map is actually bigger than that, which would allow them to kind of move that around. If they wanted to, if they wanted to do a zone change, to slide it over closer to Grabhorn, for example, they could, or they could leave it, leave it the way it is. And we're, some of it is also just trying to tune the size of things to not, in various places, to not over zone and end up with more units than the infrastructure can handle or the council was looking for. But happy to hear suggestions and tips if you think something will work better.
Well, I guess I was more curious because the purple on the land use map, the CMMUC, allows the CMRM zone. So I just like why the whole area within the blue boundary there wasn't just purple. To simplify it, and I don't know, maybe it doesn't makes it more complicated. It just looks very random.
We'll take a look. It's a good question.
Okay. And then one really tiny nitpicky thing. In the Cooper Lowlands area, the land use map and the zoning map, the very northeast corner, don't line up. The purple goes straight across, but then on the land use map, it follows the road line. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that was intentional or if that's just needs to be cleaned up.
That needs to be cleaned up.
I wish I could point for you.
Thank you. No, I see exactly what you're talking about right here.
Yeah.
Yep. It should be lined up with the road.
That's all I had. Those two.
Thank you. I think the next hand that I saw pop up was Commissioner Lawler.
Thank you. I'm trying to grapple with the issue of transportation, which we know is going to come down the line sooner or later in discussion. And I'm wondering, where the highest density, the highest activity areas may coincide with future transit potential. And I'm seeing maybe arterials are the parameter. I'm just wondering, have you talked to our transit provider for the area, TriMet, and to determine like what kind of road systems they consider to be appropriate for transit? And I'm wondering, it seems like 175th might be a logical one, but then I'm wondering about Tile Flat, and I'm thinking that across the street is farmland. Am I correct? And I'm wondering about putting high density adjacent to farmland. And I'm trying to figure out, for example, I'm sorry, I'm rambling here. That's one question. And then how does this integrate into Cooper Mountain South, and might that high density there be more appropriate adjacent to the existing Cooper Mountain South area where there's already some activity?
Further south? First,
Cooper Mountain South, the South Cooper Mountain area where it's already developing, and it's it's a blank slate other than streets, so I don't know the land uses well enough in that northern area of South Cooper Mountain to know how that integrates with this plan, and could there be some more integration, I guess, with that high density and commercial use there along Tile Flat and move it farther east, I guess is what I'm thinking. Could you comment on why you put that there? And is that indeed farmland south of there?
Well, to take a step back, I wanted to add that TriMet has been involved with the project for the last several years, and they've been watching. They've been a part of our technical advisory committee meetings, weighing in and reviewing these maps. And so this is developed with TriMet's input. We typically try to site commercial near the intersection of arterials, and So moving it away from here would move it away from arterials where we're expecting just a lot of traffic. I don't know if you have anything to add, Brian, to the location for commercial, and considerations for being in a different location.
I would just add that the market study that we did earlier in the project showed some demand for commercial, but not a lot of, a giant amount. So we wanted to try to put those two red commercial areas in places that had the most opportunity to succeed. And having them at the intersection of the collector and the arterial there, it near the park allows people, it has built-in people nearby, and also people driving by can both be customers for that area. So it's the intersection location is trying to be placed so it's like a safe location with sight distance to corners and things. So that's how it ended up there.
Is it true that south of Tile Flat there is farmland? That's not an urban area, is it?
It's rural. It's rural.
Yeah. It is rural. Okay. How about the integration question? Integrating land uses into the South Cooper Mountain development. I'm sorry. I guess Alvord Lane, for example. What is north of Alvord Lane in that area labeled South Cooper Mountain? What land uses have been approved for that area?
North of
maybe
Alvord?
Underdeveloped. I mean, that might already be developed.
I'll go ahead and jump in here. So for South Cooper Mountain, which is of course directly kind of to the bottom south of the Cooper Mountain Community Plan area, the only areas that are actually zoned for commercial use in South Cooper Mountain are fronting on Shoals Ferry Road. So they're actually off the bottom of this map. And that's also where we're seeing most of the multifamily apartment building development in South Cooper Mountain. So the portions of South Cooper Mountain that are abutting the Cooper Mountain Community Plan area here are actually that more general lower density residential that has the most similarities to that Cooper Mountain residential mix that you're seeing in the light yellow on the map. But you will see the solid color lines, the solid green, the solid blue lines are streets that many of which have actually been constructed, although not all of them, in South Cooper Mountain. And you can see that they are then designed to continue through the Cooper Mountain area. And those, of course, are dotted lines now because they don't exist yet. But the connection between South Cooper Mountain and Cooper Mountain is intended to really flow. And once both areas are fully developed, you shouldn't be able to tell the difference when you're kind of like crossing over from the South Cooper Mountain area into the Cooper Mountain area. They're intended to really function seamlessly as neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All righty. Thank you.
Commissioner Glenwinkle, you did have your hand up earlier. Do you still have a question? You are muted, Commissioner Glenwinkle.
Okay, sorry. My first question was, I thought I heard someone say we were going to be discussing the park overlays next week. Does that also include the resource overlays, or are we discussing those tonight?
Resource overlay is tonight, but if it's a big topic, and we can always come back if you have follow-up questions next week. We will come back to the agenda.
Well, one of my questions about the resource overlay kind of relates to a lot of the public comments we got. Mm-hmm. Obviously, addressing all those comments is outside the scope of the meeting tonight, but I am just curious. There were some comments about kind of man-made environmental features that seem to have been factored into the overlays, such as tree farms that have been planted, man-made lakes that were created on properties. And so I was just wondering if you could kind of discuss a little bit about how you factored in any man-made environmental features to the overlays, or if those were not considered and not factored in at all. And then I also did have some questions about transportation.
Would you mind if the second part of the discussion is a review of the resource overlay, and we have resource overlay questions? Would you mind if we answer that one in the second part?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, that'd be great.
And then my question on transportation, and forgive me if I'm just not seeing the obvious, but the roads that are shown on the map, how will the additional roads be designed down the road to actually accommodate all of the neighborhoods? Because these are just arterials and neighborhood routes, but there would theoretically be streets going through this entire area if it was filled with houses. So how do those roads get designed and developed in the future or planned for?
Those are typically worked out during development review. And that would be proposed by developers when projects come into the city, and we can figure it out through that process. So they're not pictured on this map.
I just want to reinforce Rob's comment there. The reason we don't actually place local streets is that different kinds of block sizes and configurations, particularly in an area that has the kind of slopes that Cooper Mountain has, is something that we found is really best left to the process when those property boundaries are created. You'll see that a lot of these properties are actually quite large and will need to be subdivided prior to development. And if we took the time to lay out all of those roads, not only would it be very time consuming for staff, but the chances that they would then need to be modified once a developer is taking a really hard look at exactly what they want to build is pretty high. So the level of work that we do on the plan stays away from trying to figure out that level of detail, partly because we want to be able to have flexibility, but also because there's almost a sense of false certainty if we do all that detailed work. It assumes that we actually know everything we need to do to understand what's going to be best at that very small scale level, and it doesn't work out so great.
Sure, I understand. Okay, thank you.
All right. Do any other commissioners want to weigh in at this moment? Otherwise, we can let staff continue.
So we have a few more questions that I could for the second part of this discussion. But that is, do you have comments or questions about the allowed uses or site development standards in section 20, the housing variety and integration standards, or the approach to commercial uses in the draft code?
Commissioners, does anyone have anything else they want to weigh in on here?
I'm sorry. I said this is probably out of scope of tonight, but I'm going to ask it, and then somebody can tell me it's not out of scope. But once development starts and developers identify parcels and start working with the city, do these, when we think about integration, when we think about low income, mixed use, do these land use designations prevent predatory development, like setting up cost prohibitive HOAs, or is that not something that can be addressed in a land use scenario?
They don't address HOAs. So that would be not something that we're involved in. Could you give, I mean, I'm interested in an example of what would be cost prohibitive, how an HOA would charge a membership fee or something.
Rob, I would just note that there are lots of examples where the CC&Rs associated with an HOA will, for example, further restrict what can happen within the HOA. There is actually state law that's in place now that basically prevents a new HOA with CCNRs from prohibiting middle housing development or ADUs, for example. So there are some provisions that are already in place at the state level that I think get to what Commissioner Ellis is asking about. Because those are in state law, we don't actually need to include them here in the Cooper Mountain Community Plan. But if you want to share additional details about those concerns, we can certainly have a conversation at the staff level and explore whether there would be other things that we could do to address that.
Gotcha. You hit exactly on the head with what I was thinking of, which are the CCNRs that would restrict either unique or ways to modify housing over time to allow either even more creative mixed uses, different kinds of densities. There is the issue of cost too, because HOA fees are not set at the government level, they're set locally. They can raise and change, and push out people, and they cause problems, particularly amongst lower income folks of color, folks who are underrepresented, who can't afford things that are voted on by neighbors who might not look like them. And so there are histories where HOAs do that, but I think, Anna, you said the major thing that I had in my mind.
Commissioner Lawler.
Yeah, I'm fumbling around trying to find my note. But I think my question was really reflecting on the question 3 here, the housing variety and integration standards. You had an illustration, and I'm trying to, I didn't write down which attachment that was in.
Oh.
But I was wondering if you could just walk us through how that would work. Do you know which one I'm talking about? Where you have the 3 lots that are noted, and then you have an area surrounding that.
I'm gonna stop share and then try to. I think it's in here.
I thought I understood
the
way your description, and but I thought it'd be good to have you walk us through that.
Sure. Yeah, we keep these in our back pocket just because we're
exactly there. That's the one.
Yes. Okay, so the idea is, just to be clear, this applies to developments 3 acres or larger, and 75% of lots with only single detached homes. Let me get my pointer. So this is showing a cluster of middle housing, a row of 3, and these are showing the single detached homes around it. So if you look at all of the single detached homes on this lot, what's covered in gray is what's within this area. So it's just our way of trying to kind of come up with a quantitative approach where we can just make sure they're dispersed, and then the ones in white, they're further outside. But this is where we're showing the single detached homes near middle housing. Does that answer the question, or is it still? Another way?
I don't think I still don't understand.
Okay.
So what happens within the lots within the circle versus those that are not in the circle?
The circle is just telling us maybe if we can forget the grays there, and you're just looking at this black, this grouping of middle housing. We want to figure out what's within this radius, and my screen is cutting off the caption. I don't know if you can see it, but it's showing that, what was that? 300, yeah, that they are within 300 feet of this middle housing. That's the metric we're using. So if it's within 300 feet, it's converted to gray just to show it's within that buffer.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of these homes, again, middle housing, all of the single detached homes that are in gray are within 300 feet. And that's our idea of being close enough so that we would consider it integrated. If it's outside the 300, then it doesn't count because they're less integrated.
I
Oh, okay.
also want
Okay.
to note that the draft rules for housing types also interact with the density minimums for these areas. So when we think about what makes homes more expensive or less expensive, we think about the goal of having housing variety. It shows up in different ways, right? We have duplexes, triplexes. In these areas, the residential mixed area you can build up to a sixplex. We have the areas that are designated really for multifamily development up to much higher densities, areas where commercial is allowed, areas where commercial is required. And so these proposed regulations overlap to kind of add up to what we think is getting towards meeting the goals for the community plan, which include producing housing at a variety of price points, having housing variety, having opportunities for commercial and retail services. So again, they don't so much tell you exactly what needs to go where, but when you add these different requirements together, you're not going to end up with the kind of stereotypical suburban subdivision.
And so, for example, in this case, if the lower right area did not have those 3 lots, in the integrated housing types, this would be inconsistent with that code standard then, is what you're suggesting, and that they would need to add some more middle housing somewhere in this development area.
Yeah, assuming if it's under 75%, if removing this knocks it below 75%, then yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
Okay. Commissioner Nye?
I was going to ask about live work, and now I lost my place. It's not allowed in the CMMR zone. Is that what I just saw? And curious if there had been any discussion about allowing it in that zone.
Commissioner Nye, hi, Brian Martin again. That N in the table is consistent with how it's handled in the rest of the city. So we just kind of ported that over. And this was, did you say MR, just to be clear? CMMR?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
that's the one I was looking at. But
yeah, the orange orange zone. Yeah, that was just keeping it the same as the MR in the rest of the city. That was the idea there.
Okay.
You still can do home occupations, like consistent with the code, but it's not a straight allowed thing.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any additional comments or thoughts from commissioners? I don't see any. Staff, do you have more presentation?
Yes, we have the resource overlay.
All right.
Part 2. Okay.
Let's go.
The resource overlay indicates where additional environmental rules apply to achieve the Cooper Mountain Community Plan goals related to natural resources, as well as to meet state and regional requirements. The resource overlay protects the area's most significant natural resources. Inside the overlay, development rules are designed to promote water quality, control erosion, and reduce sedimentation in streams, conserve the scenic, recreational, and educational value of natural resources, and balance conservation and economic use by allowing reasonable economic use of property when resource impacts can be mitigated. Determining the boundary of the resource overlay starts with a natural resource inventory. On this slide, we are looking at a map of all natural resources inventoried in the area. The methodology for determining the significance of natural resource areas is described in the February 5th supplemental memo and the natural resources report available on the project website. Generally, riparian classes 1 and 2 are considered significant, and upland habitat class A and B are considered significant, which means they would be inside the resource overlay. And upland C, which is in yellowish green, that is considered not significant, which means this land is not inside the overlay. I won't get into the details here, but I would like to share two main points. First, the methodology is based on Metro's Title 13 Nature and Neighborhood requirements. And second, as required by Metro, existing forest canopy was evaluated as of December 13th, 2018, the date the urban growth boundary was expanded to include this area. On this slide, we are looking at the zoning map so that we can see the boundary of the resource overlay over the zoning. Again, the resource overlay is this light green hatch. The boundary is the outline of all significant riparian and upland habitat classes. The base zoning underneath the resource overlay is still CMRM. Again, that's yellow, which allows single detached homes, middle housing, and 5 and 6 plexes. But on portions of the lot covered by the overlay, special rules apply depending upon whether the lot is developing or not developing. On this slide, we are looking at an example of a lot that is being divided for development to build housing. This gray area represents the land inside the overlay. During a land division, 80% of the overlay on the property will be required to be protected from disturbance. That's this box here. And separated into a tract. The remaining 20% here can be disturbed for land development if an equivalent area in the overlay is planted for mitigation. Mitigation for disturbances to the overlay is equivalent to the area disturbed and can happen anywhere on the property. In this 20% is where the applicants can build roads and housing. If a property owner is not pursuing a land division, then some development would still be allowed, but in a different way. This scenario most likely applies to existing property owners. In this example, we are looking at a lot that is mostly covered by the resource overlay. The development rules would allow up to 6,000 square feet of disturbance area, depending upon how much of that lot is outside the overlay. This polygon here kind of shows you what 6,000 square feet could look like on this lot. And similar to the last example, mitigation is required for disturbances within the overlay. Now I'd like to talk about draft rules for trees. Among other things, the tree code for Cooper Mountain proposes rules that aim to preserve existing trees, expand the tree canopy to reach a 40% tree canopy target in the plan area outside the nature park, and to provide some development flexibility on sites with a lot of trees. When the code mentions tree preservation, it refers to retaining existing trees and tree canopy on the site. The minimum tree preservation percentages are 65% of existing tree canopy within the resource overlay and 40% of existing tree canopy outside the resource overlay. The tree canopy policies in the community plan call for incentives that encourage the retention of native trees and tree groves, which provide higher quality habitat. The draft code accomplishes this by requiring stronger protections for native trees inside and outside the overlay. Inside the overlay, native trees are the only trees subject to the preservation requirement. Outside the overlay, native trees and non-native trees are subject to the preservation requirement. Some trees are exempt from preservation standards, including nuisance trees and agricultural trees, which are trees planted with the intent to harvest as part of a commercial timber harvest operation. Let's look at an example of how a site could meet the minimum preservation standards. On this 1 acre lot, 75% of the lot is covered by the resource overlay. That is this light green area. The gray circles represent the amount of tree canopy that could be removed, and the green circles represent trees preserved on the site that meet minimum tree preservation requirements inside and outside the overlay. That concludes a review of the standards for tree preservation. If an applicant chooses not to meet the standards, then they could apply through a discretionary process to use a different tree preservation method. This process sets a target of at least 50% tree canopy preservation on the entire site. First, 65% of tree canopy inside the resource overlay must be preserved, and then additional preservation must occur elsewhere on the site, either inside the overlay or outside the overlay, until the total reaches 50% tree canopy. A discretionary process sets priorities for where tree preservation could occur, as shown in this slide, but allows flexibility for solutions on a site-by-site basis. Now I'd like to talk about the minimum tree canopy standards. Whereas minimum tree preservation refers to retaining existing trees on the site, minimum tree canopy standards focus on ensuring the site has sufficient tree canopy either now or in the future. This can be achieved using tree preservation, tree planting, or a combination of preservation and planting. The draft proposed rules require 65% tree canopy inside the resource overlay. On this slide, we are looking at an example of how a site could meet the minimum tree canopy standards. On this 1 acre lot, 75% of the lot is covered by the resource overlay. Again, this light green area is the land inside the overlay. Existing canopy, which covers only 25% of this overlay, is represented by the light green circles. To meet the standard, a property owner could plant new native trees within the overlay to attain 65% canopy coverage. That concludes a review of the standards for tree canopy. Property owners can apply through a discretionary process to instead meet a tree canopy target of 50% for the entire site. The development rules in this section prioritize planting trees in areas that enhance natural resources. A second discretionary process allows the tree canopy requirement to be as low as 40% in certain situations. For example, the property owner could demonstrate that the site has utility issues or is prone to risks related to site conditions. The draft code also includes rules for tree removal and tree maintenance that apply outside of the draft proposed rules for preserving trees and enhancing canopy. These rules apply to topics such as tree protection standards during development, tree planting standards, and soil volume standards. Outside the code, staff is also working on adjusting rules for planting street trees to ensure large canopy trees can be planted. That brings us to our discussion, and this is the end of the staff presentation for this evening. We have 3 questions related to resource overlay and trees. Do you have any comments about the resource overlay provisions, Cooper-specific tree code, or comments or suggestions for topics for next week's work session?
Commissioners, does someone want to start out here?
I can start. I think I have an easy-ish one. You, as part of the flexible alternatives for this tree canopy, you state someone may complete a wildlife corridor for birds, mammals, or large mammals. What defines a wildlife corridor?
Well, the way we have it written is that a wildlife expert would have to study the site, propose a plan, and then the land in the corridor would have to be put into an easement for protection. There are many, we've looked at this a little bit, there are many different ways you can do it, and really you have to start with the species you're trying to protect and then design the corridor around the species and vegetation.
Commissioner Ellis.
Yeah, just maybe to get to the heart of what I'm sure will come up in public comments and what we received as well. There were a couple of comments that were very well documented, by the way, Dr. Sayre and one of his neighbors. What's the process? You know, we're now in 2024, and this plan has many moving parts dating back a couple of years. What's the process for ensuring that the comments around accuracy of the overlay, the actual current use of the land, whether it's buildable, developable land that we're leaving on the table, et cetera, et cetera. What's the process for ensuring that that ultimately gets updated, properly reviewed, you know, new surveys, new photography, whatever it needs to make sure that it reflects what's out there? Because if there's additional developable land for more units, we don't want to leave that on the table.
Thank you. Alyssa Maxwell is going to jump in and take this one.
Hi, Commissioners. Alyssa Maxwell, and I am Capital Planning Project Manager, and also had the pleasure of working on the details of the code related to the resource overlay. So yeah, we recognize this is a question that everybody has, and we are, you know, the overlay for resource overlay is attempting to balance both natural resource preservation, which is that high priority goal that we've got from Council for this area, as well as balancing that against reasonable economic use and, of course, housing needs. So we also have to follow our Metro rules in defining the resource overlay, which means that the area of that overlay is defined based on the time that this property was added to the urban growth boundary. So when we're mapping those natural resources, we're looking at December of 2018 is the date that Metro requires us to evaluate those natural resources. We recognize that properties can and will change between that 2018 date and when a property might eventually annex and go through a development and land division process. The natural resource overlay is intended to create that high quality habitat in the midst of intense development use. So I would think of it as when we come into a site and we're going to subdivide and put in multifamily, that is necessitating that we're squeezing the areas available for resource protection. And so that is our opportunity to then protect and enhance those natural resources. So that's why you might see a site that in the interim period might be going through there might be tree removal, or maybe there's agricultural use, but it's still within a priority distance to one of those, or a distance to one of those priority streams. And so that gives us an opportunity during land development to then replant that area and create that habitat corridor in the midst of more intense uses.
So maybe a follow on, does the city or someone, whoever it may be, does the city take on the job of reforesting and quote unquote repairing an area? And I'm playing out hypothetical, but specifically citing examples from the public comments where current landowners would have leveled and harvested lumber and otherwise made, you know, some amount of improvements to a given area. If that area ends up not being developable because it's in a resource causeway, who's responsible for returning it to actually be like a natural area?
Right, it's a good question. So it is a long-term look. We have some standards that would require some amount of mitigation through, well, some amount of replanting for those areas, either as mitigation for other areas that you're impacting, and also then the tree code has a part of it. As Rob was just saying, we have those minimum canopy requirements. So we have area-wide canopy goals, and our opportunity to achieve that really is in planting through the resource overlay. So we would have 65% canopy requirement in the resource overlay. Those plantings would need to occur during development, similar to the way, you know, landscaping standards and, you know, street trees and things that need to get planted. We would have our planting requirements in the overlay at the time of development. It doesn't change what someone can do on their property in the interim, but it is looking then long-term at getting us back to a quality habitat condition.
Gotcha. Okay. I know that our mandate here is to consider whether or not the proposed rules align with the stated outcomes. I just worry that if we don't use correct and up-to-date information, that if we leave additional opportunities on the table for development, and that if we have that as a stated position today, then there's every incentive for current landowners to do what they can to dispose of as many resources today as possible prior to any districting or zoning going in right now, so that they're not limited by any of these kinds of rules. So my general feeling is that even if there's rules and laws, I understand that. I don't feel that they're fit for this purpose. So I'm just saying that out loud. That's not really a question. I'm sorry.
No, that's fair. That's fair.
I guess I can jump in. I have questions. So I am curious about the target of a 50% tree canopy kind of overall. My question is, how does that relate to what is there now? Is that a total reduction of tree canopy of what is there today in a pre-development condition, or is that going to be an increase?
Speaking, vaguely, because it would be site specific, of course. But most of the trees are in the resource overlay. The significant majority of trees are in the overlay. So if somebody were looking to cross that line and saying they wanted to plant outside of it, then we're looking at areas without many trees, and it would be enhancing the area possibly more than is there now. This results, every case study would be different. It's possible that this would result in more tree canopy. But really a big part of this project and the goal is really trying to save the existing trees that are there. So sometimes it's just easier to save the existing trees in the overlay. But if there was any reason why they kind of wanted to cross that line, this gives them the flexibility, but then you have to enhance.
Sure. I have more questions. Using canopy is an interesting measure. It's not a typical one. It does require developers to do a slightly different survey approach, because DBH is a more typical survey method for trees. So that is interesting to me that you're using that exclusively. I guess I was curious why that was going to be the measure as opposed to quantity and size. Trunk size is kind of more of a measure, which often results in an increase in trees when you have to, say, mitigate for tree removal, because a lot of times jurisdictions, your own included in other parts of the city, have to match a certain kind of inch per inch sort of scenario.
Yeah, we went back and forth. We hired an arborist to help us draft this code. And I think one of the reasons, if I remember correctly, was we heard sometimes that lower quality trees, I'd be interested if you've heard different, but sometimes lower quality trees were saved with the DBH approach, and that we could get more environmental benefits from something that's looking at area and not just DBH. But I'm very curious to hear, if you have a different opinion on that.
I don't necessarily have a different opinion. I could certainly see how that happens. It depends on how restrictive the code is for removal of, say, larger, more mature trees. I don't need to get into my complaints about Beaverton's tree code, because I think I've done it before. It could be improved. So I could certainly see how that could happen. So that is helpful to understand how that canopy aspect is working, and certainly does encourage a larger tree canopy preservation, which hopefully is healthier and more mature. I do kind of getting though to more. This is not a critique of the canopy. It is a little more complicated, but it is an interesting way to look at it. I am curious about mitigation. So can you clarify for me? So if we're in the overlay, if they have a property there, they have to show that they have 65% of, correct? 65% of the canopy it has to have 65% canopy coverage. So presumably if it had more than that, you could maybe remove trees. And if you're outside of the overlay, you need 40% coverage. So if you say had a parcel that was outside the overlay, but it had, hypothetically speaking, because you said there aren't that many trees, but hypothetically it had 50, or it had like 60% trees, you could remove up to 20 you could remove a portion of those so that you only had 40% coverage outside of the overlay. Is that correct?
I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. We're talking about preservation?
I'm talking, yeah, it's kind of preservation, but leading to mitigation. Like, are those tree removals able to be removed without any kind of mitigation aspect, as long as you haven't crossed that coverage threshold?
I'll speak on preservation. It can going back and forth can sometimes be confusing, but that's always a good starting point. Okay. So 40%, that's the target for outside the overlay. That's 40% of existing trees. So we're not asking for 40% canopy coverage outside the overlay. Okay. We're saying of those existing trees, and this is an example that shows right here, there are 5 trees here. If the target is 40%, you could take out these 3. Mm-hmm. There's no mitigation. I mean, because if you're meeting the standard, then we're not asking you to mitigate. So you could take out these 3 trees. Mm-hmm. If you went below 40, there could be mitigation fee in lieu for that. Sometimes a tree is just in a bad place, an inconvenient place for utility access, and there would be a pathway to so that you could access the site and build housing. And I think that I said this before, but one thing I'll reiterate is that canopy coverage outside the overlay is very, very low. There's a lot of agricultural fields, things like that. So 40% of a sparsely populated site of healthy native and non-native trees is, a smaller number. And to be clear, when we look at canopy, that's more looking at the future condition of the site. The target is for inside the overlay only if they follow the standards. They would have to choose the guidelines to kind of cross the overlay and then provide more trees.
Okay. So, thank you for that explanation. I think one of the things that concerns me, and this is back to my other griping, is that I think understand there's not a lot of trees out here today because those trees were removed a long time ago to make agricultural area. But one of my bigger concerns is the removal without any kind of mitigation, even if it was just fee in lieu, to allow for planting elsewhere. I just think that there's an issue with the city of Beaverton moving more and more toward less tree canopy, kind of an overall net loss, as opposed to working toward a net gain. And while we're only looking at Cooper Mountain, all of these areas do contribute to kind of this greater need within the city to improve the canopy conditions throughout. So I don't know if there's any movement there through this project or back to overhauling code in general for the mitigation and tree code. But it just seems like there's kind of a lost goal here that's kind of bigger arching citywide goal that probably needs to happen to improve the urban tree canopy throughout the city.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is just to touch on one point. This won't address multiple concerns, but it's just one small bullet in the presentation, but we're working internally to try to change how we do things to support larger canopy trees and then really rely on those large form trees to be bigger players in contributing towards the canopy. When we were trying to figure out how we could get to 40%, we looked, that's 40% again for the plan area for canopy coverage, taking out the nature park. We looked at what was inside the overlay, what was outside, and then what happens if we really try hard to get those bigger trees, street trees in. And with the resource overlay and trying to get those bigger trees in, we can get to 40% through those two things alone. There would also be tree planting requirements associated, with housing, so we have those as well. But I do want to go back to one thing you said, and is your comment also specifically about the preservation standard? Like you want us to look at removing trees and not just allowing fee and lieu if it's outside the overlay?
I think it would be ideal. I would not want to take fee and lieu off the table as a mechanism, because if you ever work on the design or development side, sometimes it's just necessary. But I do think incentivizing as much protection as possible, and where that isn't possible, us all, as a development, needing to help participate in kind of betterment of the city. I think fee and lieu is a useful tool, whether the city uses that for replanting elsewhere, city owned or managed properties, or even using potentially being able to use that fee to maintain a healthy tree canopy, taking care of street trees and things like that, and making sure they are as healthy as possible. That also contributes and helps. So I do think that from my own experience working on the city is that there can be quite a bit of tree removal without any kind of penalty or mitigation required.
Commissioner McCann, I just want to jump in briefly since you wanted also kind of keep in mind the citywide context. I appreciate that. So the approach that we're exploring in Cooper Mountain is really intended to really kind of be a way to start building the foundation of looking at the citywide approach to trees and canopy citywide. And because we were able to do this kind of deeper dive for Cooper Mountain, we've had an opportunity to really explore some approaches that are very different from what we're doing citywide. Working on the regulations that apply in the rest of Beaverton is something that is on the list of things that we will be tackling in the future. And what we expect is not that we will be simply applying the approach to trees in Cooper to the rest of the city, because it frankly is pretty tailored to this area, but that we will have some kind of philosophies and tools that we can use as we take a look at doing things differently in the rest of the city as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna.
I don't think anyone will defend or shed any tears over the tree code that's in place for Beaverton now. It has many deficiencies.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I think some of my questions and comments are in line with what you just clarified, which is that assuming that there would be some lessons learned from what's happening here that might be applied elsewhere. So maybe not everything I'm saying is necessarily applicable, or the city might not want to integrate things here, but just kind of thinking about it in a bigger picture as other things change and shift. So I'm going to be quiet now, though. Ask my commissioners if anyone else has comments or thoughts. I am not seeing any more raised hands. And I believe, staff, that was the end of your presentation?
It was, yes.
Okay, great. So now is the time for public comments on the Cooper Mountain Community plan draft code. For those viewing via Zoom webinar, please communicate by using the raise hand feature in your Zoom menu bar. If you are calling in, press 9 to alert the chair that you would like to speak. So I'm going to, forgive me, I'm new at this. I believe the first person I see with a raised hand is Mimi Dukas. Sorry if I ruined your name.
Good evening. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Can you begin by stating your name and address for the record?
Yes, my name is Mimi Dukas with AKS Engineering. My address is 12965 Southwest Herman Road, Tualatin, Oregon 97065. I'm actually here speaking on behalf of 3 different property owners within Cooper Mountain. So I'm going to take them one by one. So first, I'm going to speak on behalf of Dean and Tony Sparks. They own tax lot 1S236900. It's the mixed-use property located at Tile Flat Road that has the commercial designation on it that was discussed previously. Hopefully everybody knows where that is. We did submit a letter regarding this property late this afternoon. I assume you have not read it because it came in so late, but I'm going to testify kind of covering these topics. If you want to do a deeper dive or want to remember what I said, this letter will help you do that. Attached to it is an exhibit that includes the property, so if you need help getting your bearings, that may help. So first of all, the zoning map that has been provided, the draft, we have requested a couple times to reconfigure the zoning on the property. The Sparks are not excited about the commercial designation. It sounds like that is not going away. If it's not going away, they would like it reconfigured as we have shown on the attached map, so that we don't have the little segmented parcels that are currently shown. Right now, the commercial area is a east-west rectangle and it's bisected by the collector road. We'd like the commercial shown all to the west of the collector in a continuous rectangle. That way it's not bifurcated. We have the multifamily on one side, the commercial on the other. In speaking with staff, it sounds like that whole district needs to have somewhere provide the commercial, so I think there is some flexibility, but it seems kind of harmless to update the mapping for what the Sparks are requesting. Secondly, the parks overlay concept. This appears to be a concept. I've been doing land use for a long time. I have not seen parks physically mapped the way this is proposed. Typically for these types of areas, parks are shown with an asterisk somewhere on the map as sort of an indicator of this general vicinity needs this type of park, whether it's a 5-acre or 3-acre, something to that effect. This is saying parks shall be in this exact location with this exact configuration, and if you don't like it, you need to go through a full land use process. That takes a lot of free market forces out of play, and there's no longer a negotiation between the park district and the property owner. So if the park district, if they were nefarious, could offer a very low value for the property because you don't have a choice. It has to be a park, end of story, and it has to go on that property. So we would prefer that you use the traditional technique of identifying service areas and saying a park needs to be in a certain area. I understand that the goal is to find flatter land and not leftover spaces, but if you could put locational criteria that goes with it, that would be more helpful. The other factor for the Sparks is that they're not a land developer. They're a property owner. They will find a development partner someday. The Parks Department, as I understand it, doesn't have a lot of cash sitting around. A lot of their park acquisition will be through system development charge credits, which just doesn't help them in that early park acquisition conversation. So parks are kind of complicated, and this mapping system is not conducive for property owners. Furthermore, park dedication is required with any type of land division. So even a 3-lot partition would require the dedication of the park land shown on the Sparks property, which is about a third of their property is shown as park. Doing a 3-lot partition so that they can sell the commercial piece to one developer, the multifamily to another, and parks to THPRD, it triggers the entire dedication of that parkland. That's not proportional. It doesn't match Nexus. It's really a fundamental problem. So switching over to the development code itself, the
Ms.
draft.
Douglas, I just wanted to let you know that you have about 30 seconds left.
Okay. For the commercial development requirements, the fact that section 20.22.30 requires the commercial square footage to happen in the first phase of development does not match market forces. And if you don't want to do the commercial in the first phase of development, you have to go through a discretionary land use process. All of these land use processes and steps add to the delay and expense for land development, and it's going to decrease affordability within the district. So we provided a letter that provides more detail. These are the primary concerns the Sparks have. Any questions on the Sparks property? Moving on to my second property owner client is the Cobies. Their property is the 195-acre parcel south of the Cooper Mountain Nature Park. Jordan Ramus submitted a letter today. Again, I can't imagine you've read it yet, raising the Cobies concerns with the draft development code. Their property primary concern is the natural resource overlay zone. It covers a large portion of the Cobie property. The mapping, as we read through the environmental report, assessed a special setback along McKernan Creek due to its proximity to Cooper Mountain Nature Park, which feels arbitrary. And it is not based on an actual on-the-ground natural resource assessment by a natural resource team. It's based on aerial photos, historic data. Typically, Goal 5 resources are indicated on a map, and then they have to go be verified by a natural resource professional, a report put together delineating the actual resource at the time of development, and that is how you determine the resource. In this case, the mapping is locked in. It's based on historic data dating back to, I believe it was 2018, before it's even in the city of Beaverton. It's not based on the ground mapping. If we do on the ground mapping and we disagree with the mapping, we have to go through, again, an extensive land use process to change that. So that does not feel fair or proportionate. There's very significant restrictions on what can happen in that natural resource overlay. And then there's mitigation measures on top of it. So we have significant concerns with that. It's detailed in the Jordan Ramus letter. Happy to answer any questions you have on that.
Do commissioners have any questions?
Okay.
You have one more, correct?
Yes, one more. The final property is up at the near the roundabout, up at the Kemmer area around the Cooper Mountain water tank. So that is tax lot 1S130C201 and tax lot 1S130CC100. This property has two general designations. So it has general residential, the yellow, and then it's got the mixed use purple zone. We have concerns with the yellow provisions for the diversity standards that are proposed. Not so much in the housing types and providing that, but the locational standards. I think the fact that staff had a hard time explaining it to Ms. Lawler shows that it's a pretty complicated proposal, and it doesn't actually achieve a public good. It is randomly dispersing different housing types geographically, and that does not, the location is not necessarily the public good. The public good is making sure that you have the variety of housing. Good urban design, you want to be able to place different housing types and create streetscapes in a consistent manner. You don't want housing types that are just scattered willy-nilly across a neighborhood. That's not good urban design. It's a pockmarked design. So we're okay with a variety of housing types, but the locational standards are excessive. If you're providing 3 different housing types in each project and you've got multiple properties across the mountain, you're going to get that dispersal just through that natural process. So we feel like it is regulations that don't actually achieve a public good. Other than that, there's just a lot of regulations. We think that this is a lot of information to come out with. It came out at New Year's Eve. There's been one open house with the property owners. When the city did the concept plan effort, there was extensive public outreach. There's not been extensive public outreach on this. Staff's been accessible. I've been working with them on some details, but I think it needs some more time to be thought through and get other people's opinions on what is good code and what if this is in alignment with the goals and objectives of the plan. Happy to answer any question.
Great. Do commissioners have any questions of the speaker? I don't think they do.
Great. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And then, I believe I see another hand for Matthew Sprague. The commission, will you please state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, hi, my name is Matt Sprague with Pioneer Design Group, 9020 Southwest Washington Square Road in Portland, Oregon, and 97223. I represent 2 property owners within this area. I did submit a letter to city staff, which would have been passed on to the commission, and both Dr. Casey Sayer and Mr. Dave Olson also submitted emails with information to the commission. So I would encourage the commission to read those to kind of get an understanding of everything that we have concerns about. I only want to cover a few things tonight, but what I found interesting is that Ms. Stukas had a lot of very common points that you'll find that I pointed out in my letter as well in terms of the requirements. One of my biggest concerns, besides the limited amount of time to review such an extensive code revision for such a small area, is that we are adding substantial provisions to this area that ultimately are very confusing. I can see that with the commission's questions to staff, that even them reading what staff has presented in these provisions is a little bit confusing and difficult to understand. I've been a land use planner for 32 years. And when I read through this code, I get quite confused in a lot of different areas about what is the actual requirement that is being requested by staff. And then the addition of all of these provisions, these new provisions to the code, increases the amount of effort, the amount of work, and the amount of costs associated with development for this area. It seems counter what one of the primary goals is, to provide more affordable and inclusive housing opportunities for residents in the city of Beaverton. Just one quick example is when you start adding in the undercrossing requirements for large mammals, for example. You might do that in an area where you don't have a stream corridor that supports vertically and horizontally the topography that allows you to construct that. So you have to build a huge ramp to build up your crossing to get over the stream corridor in order to allow the large mammal passage. So that just adds additional cost. That's just one very minor example. So when you start adding all of these costs together with these additional provisions, this is passed on to the future homeowner or lessee within the property. So you're kind of going backwards for one of the goals that you're trying to achieve. So that's kind of a big item for me. I think that what we should be doing is simplifying code and making it more streamlined, more efficient, more cost effective to allow us to create more affordable housing opportunities within this area. The second item I wanted to talk about is the resource overlay map. When you look at that resource overlay map, you've got the different classifications of resources. But if you look at the Class C areas, those Class C areas are primarily located within areas that are already going to be preserved as vegetated corridor in accordance with Clean Water Services requirements. So when you look at the overall overlay and kind of zone in on what's left for development, it's a very small amount of area that's left for development when we're looking at these overlays. What's important, I wanted to note about the overlays, the city is utilizing December 13th, 2018 Metro vote as the date for establishing these. They also note that they're utilizing 2019 aerial photography, which is post 2013 or December 13th, 2018. But Dr. Casey Sayer, in his letter, he provided you with a link to a letter to Len Peterson, the president of Metro Council, that is from the Department of Land Conservation and Development. If you look at pages 52 and 53, and I just scanned this and I found these two right away, it says that, the letter is dated January 22nd, 2020, and it says, more detailed analysis of environmental resources and impacts is appropriate at subsequent planning stages for the Cooper Mountain study area. Staff has not completed those subsequent analyses and utilizing the December 13th, 2018 date in error, in our opinion. I also wanted to speak to some of Mr. Ellis's questions. When it comes to HOAs, a lot of the costs associated with an HOA is highly dependent on what the HOA has to maintain as a part of the provisions that come out of the city's approval process. So if there are substantial open space areas that are required to be maintained by the HOA, it drives the cost higher and higher and higher. So you see how that could be prohibitive towards more affordable housing opportunities. I could probably speak to the commission for hours about this. I don't feel like that the time frame that we're dealing with these code revisions is long enough. It would be nice to have these code provisions released as they are created so that we have an opportunity to provide valuable comment on each specific code section to allow us to really do a deep dive and look into what these code provisions mean. So I'm going to wrap it up there, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Thank you. Do commissioners have any questions of the speaker? No, I don't see any. didn't need to mute myself. With that, I'm not sure if I'm seeing anyone else who is interested in speaking at this time. I know we're all going to be back next week. Oh, there's one. The commission calls Eric Squires to speak. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Eric Squires. I'm a property owner and I reside at 17172 Southwest Brider Lane, Aloha, Oregon, 97007. After reviewing this presentation, which I thank you all for your service on, I'm left confused as to who is really taking the lead in the significant natural resource overlay. Is it Metro? Is it Beaverton? Is it Washington County? After attending the Washington County Significant Natural Resource presentation at their conference center in Hillsborough, that was an event filled with acrimony. And it was really triggering a lot of questions. And these processes appear to be running in parallel and logically would be combined through the Washington County Coordinating Committee, but I'm not seeing that happening there. So I'm really left at a loss as to who's on point. And with that, who's going to be the enforcer? Concluding on that element of my remarks is that I felt that that particular event that was hosted by Washington County was leading and requesting us into volunteering information that would potentially reduce our property values. And this is quite interesting because I found that owners of properties within the significant natural resource overlays are receiving extra regulation, whereas our neighbors to the south were able to clear cut and take arguably identical resources and dispose of them as they pleased. So I'm finding this not to be equitable with my neighbors. I'd like to close my remarks with a reminder that my property at 17172 Southwest Brider Lane was inventoried by the city of Beaverton with LiDAR mapping. And we had a home site that was cut into the side of the hill, and that was mapped, and the data was syndicated to multiple state, regional, and county level databases and identified as a landslide hazard, particularly with the Slido database. And I presented this remark at the Significant Natural Resource Overlay meeting with Washington County, and county staff were unable to give me an answer as how they could remove that. So closing my remarks, what I had to do was hire a bulldozer, and what's marked as overlay, significant natural resource overlay, was scraped clean by a bulldozer so I could backfill one of the most development unfriendly tasks, and that's the city labeling a home site as a landslide hazard. And this is just an example of the irony and the ambiguity that I'm finding in this process. So I would hope that that would be a touchstone that staff could guide themselves on to reduce the ambiguity, and particularly with the regulation comment that Matt Sprague made, which I'm finding that, you know, looking at all this regulation, why do I get saddled with all this when my neighbors got to develop with much less regulation? I just don't see the equity there. Thank you for entertaining my remarks. I would avail any questions if anyone wants to ask. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Do commissioners have any questions of Mr. Squires?
Sorry, just a pure curiosity question, sir. The landslide mark on the map, I didn't quite hear that. Maybe my audio weirded out for a second. Did you say that your house was marked as a landslide event, or the land was marked as a landslide risk?
The brief response here is approximately in 1977, the gentleman who owned the Mountainside High School property came up and, at the request of my father, cut a shelf in the side of Cooper Mountain for us to replace our home. We identified and put in a home site, leveled out the spot, and we never developed. That was left fallow, and then it was subsequently mapped through the LiDAR mapping that the city of Beaverton engaged in. That mapping, because of essentially a right angle that was cut into the side of the mountain, was identified as a steep slope landslide hazard. Fleshing that out a little bit, I've lived up here since 1960. We've owned since 68. I've lived up here since 1969. I know the mountain, and frankly, I disagree with what I've seen with the Slido mapping and the LiDAR inputs. I think this really is germane to this conversation because in the planning effort, if we have raw bad data inputting into this plan, and I can't get that changed, that really sets a bad expectation of outcomes. So I just it sucks because, well, I've spent the money, I've backfilled it. It's sloped pretty much like Cooper Mountain is now and was, but nobody can unsyndicate the data. County staff is stumped. I've pitched this to Beaverton planners as well, and it just sits there. And it's a pain point. And I think this is an appropriate venue to raise that issue. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. I don't believe I am seeing any other raised hands. We are getting a bit late in the evening. I think, but we will be back next week to talk on the same subject. So with that, I believe that's it. And so we can adjourn now at 8:42 p.m.